In response to Representative Wilson's questions, Admiral Lesher, about Ukraine working with Turkey, you said, quote, "What it does highlight in a positive sense, from a strategic perspective, we're focused on integrated deterrence that you see being done very incredibly well." I'm intrigued by this concept of integrated deterrence. I am eagerly awaiting the publication of the National Security Strategy and then the National Defense Strategy, and assume integrated deterrence will be the cornerstone of it. But in this context and in light of your comments, two questions about integrated deterrence. What do you see being integrated into deterrence that wasn't there before?
So the concept, as I was highlighting it, is integrated across all domains. So you see an increased focus in the joint warfighting concept, multi-domain, integrating the domains, which is not to say they weren't before. It's an evolution, for sure. And then the broader, again, evolution to focus and deliver as part of a joint force, as part of whole of government, and working in particular with allies and partners, all an evolution and an emphasis, I think, that you're familiar with.
But if we're doing integrated deterrence very incredibly well in Ukraine, it raises a second question, which is, what did we deter?
Excellent question, I suppose. So we're deterring any expansion into the NATO territories that we're committed to defend.
But in a very real sense, I think, would it be fair to say deterrence, we failed to deter Putin from invading, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
So there was a deterrence failure. I don't mean this to like score a cheap point. I just think that's interesting. That's something we should study. We should understand why it happened. My own view, and this gets to integrated deterrence and part of why I'm skeptical of the concept, is that if it is used to suggest that we can rely on non-military tools, specifically sanctions, or hashtag diplomacy in order to deter, uncoupled from a credible military threat, then we'll have further deterrence failures. My bias is that you have to put hard power in the path of people like Putin or Xi Jinping in order to have a hope of deterrence. I would go further and say this is the first test, real-world test of integrated deterrence, and it failed. We need to learn from that, right? I want to deter. We all want to deter. We don't want to deal with an incursion into NATO. We certainly don't want to deal with a conflict over Taiwan. But if integrated deterrence is a smokescreen for cutting our investments in hard power and somehow believing that untested technology, which won't be fielded until the end of the decade or the next decade, or allies, or statements coming out of Davos or the UN can substitute for hard power, I think we're going to see further deterrence failures. Now, I understand there are many in the building who disagree with me, and I'm open to the counter-argument, but it is a matter of fact that deterrence failed in this case. I welcome the stiffening of the Europeans' position, the shift that I perceive in Germany, the unification of the West. These are great developments that we should build upon, but deterrence still failed. And so I would argue perhaps we didn't do integrated deterrence, whatever that means, very incredibly well. And I think it would help. Usually I actually ask questions. I don't do speeches like this, but you've touched a nerve for me. One way I think the best lesson I think we can learn from this is actually in a different theater. It is in Indo-PACOM. I think the lesson is we need to think about how we armed Taiwan yesterday, right?
Yep.
After things start going boom, it's going to be hard to surge support, and we are engaged in a process of trying to deter the PLA by denial, and the threat of sanctions and the threat of a sternly worded mean tweet from the State Department press secretary is not going to deter Xi Jinping. I yield my remaining second.